Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamualaikum. Ji ayanu pakhairagale ni hao chunashumme washbale. Ohaya gonzaimes guten morgen. Hola boyo privet kaifa hal. Halishuma chatore ahlan wa sahlan marhaba. Buna mucho gracias. Swabi abhalli kare aaya. Hoj kalde nanayo say khuyomura chivatto chi hal yod kale mera khairutan. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV World and are watching World this morning. Alongside my very well-learned colleague who happens to be Miss Hajra Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that Jummah Mubarak to each and every one of you. But first things first, hello Hajra, Assalamu Alaikum. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum Assalam. Thank you so much for asking me. Jazakallah khair. In our cultures, we're asking about weather is always a conversation starter. So we will start a very interesting bit of the segment with the weather, which is very cold and dry in Islamabad, and it is expected in the most parts of Pakistan. Unfortunately, mainly cold and dry weather is expected in most parts of the country during the next 24 hours. According to Met Office, light rain, snowfall over hills is expected at isolated places in Kashmir and Baltistan during the forecast period. And that is insane that how actually people are, experiencing the cough and the dry season and the sneezes and all of these influenza. And we hope and wish and pray, because I was watching on the news the other day, the Met Office has also predicted some sort of the light level of the famine that might develop because of the very low level of the rainfall that we've witnessed, and it is very, very scary.
Exactly, and that's where actually we hope for miracles. We pray to Allah Almighty as well, and such was a miracle which actually kind of saved an Australian hiker's life as well, where a young man survived for 2 weeks in a national park in Australia by eating berries.
Oh my God.
2 grizzly bears left by hikers and drinking creek water. 23-year-old Hadi Nazari from Melbourne was lost in a national park and was discovered by a group of hikers who alerted authorities despite spending 14 days in rugged bushland. He was in good spirits and had no significant injuries. New South Wales police said over 300 people participated in the search near Australia's tallest mountain, Mount Kosciuszko. Wow. If that's the correct pronunciation.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and I think nature is always the best friend of the human beings. Now moving on to another bit of a very interesting segment, and that is how winters are being observed across the world, and especially how people enjoy that winter when it is extremely, extremely cold and below the freezing temperature. Thousands of people visited Minneapolis frozen lake Harriet to attend the annual art shanty projects despite single-digit temperatures. The event, which will continue for 4 weekends, showcases an interactive art installations, including a knitting pavilion, circus acts, and a disco inferno hotbox and ice biking. According to the news, the artistic director of the Art Shanty projects, Minnesotans are passionate about water and view the state's thousands of lakes as public spaces to enjoy even in the winter. The event, now in its 21st year, attracts 25,000 visitors annually. Oh my God, that's quite a hefty amount of the number, and this is how you enjoy the public spaces. A feature that I'm very unfortunate to say is really missing because of the excessive indulgence in the digital screen times. But now moving on, when we talk about enjoying the public spaces or the spaces which are the common heritage of the mankind, we see that there is a planetary alignment of different planets going on, and there's a lot of hype regarding that. What exactly does that mean? And it's a treat for the stargazers who have gathered and who want to enjoy such a spectacle of the celestial bodies who have lined up in the sky. And
so 5 or 6 of the planets, Hajra, I believe, are going to align, and people will be able to see them with their naked eyes on the 25th of January 2025. So it's 25th and 2025. Imagine, looking at them. I don't know whether we will be able to figure it out, whether that's Jupiter or that's Mars, or these other planets, or Uranus, for that matter as well. But to kind of answer all of these questions, we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by a researcher from SUPARCO, and he happens to be Mr. ZAIN Rahim. Hello ZAIN, Assalamu Alaikum. Good morning, how are you feeling today?
Walaikum Assalam, and very good morning to you too, and thank you so much for inviting me in the show.
It's an absolute pleasure, ZAIN. So now let's kickstart a conversation. Number one, what does this celestial event means, the planetary parade that we call it, and does it have any impact on us in the Earth living here?
Uh, we see that the planetary alignment or planetary parade event, which is being discussed overall on social media and media, it is basically an arrangement of planets in the sky. So what we see is that the planets are in their orbits and they are orbiting around the sun. So while orbiting around the sun, they come into a location or into a position that they are all at the one side of the sun. So while observing from the Earth, we see that they are creating an arc across the sky from east to west. So they look like they are marching one after the other in the night sky. And that is what is called as the planetary parade or planetary alignment. Though planetary parade is not a technical term which is being, and it is not being designated by any international organization like NASA or International Astronomical Union, but it is being used by stargazers and space enthusiasts to see or to define this astronomical event. Regarding the impact on our lives, we can see that these objects are just visible from the Earth, and they have no such impact on our lives. Besides, we can see them and enjoy the greatness of the night sky while looking the multiple planets across the sky.
Exactly. It's obviously, you know, a dream come true for everybody in the first place, and not just that. I think for all of those husbands who've been saying this to their wives, मैं तुम्हारे लिए तारे तोड़ के लाऊंगा. I think at least if they cannot do that, you know, they can actually, you know, give them that. Hey, you know what? Let's see the planetary parade as well. But sir, while we're at it, how do you think us, you know, who really do not have any connection with SUPARCO or upper space research and not know about celestial bodies, can figure out whether what planet is where, when, for example, if we are out there on the 25th of January, and what time will this, you know, planetary parade will be taking place? Can you please give us those details as well?
Yes, yes, sure. The best time to observe this event is right after the sunset. So when you go outside and look at the sky, you will find some bright objects in the sky. Those objects, while the sun is just has just set, are basically the planets. Now, which planets or which bright object is what planet? Then for that, if you see in the western direction, you will see two bright objects, and those two planets are the planet Venus and planet Saturn. So now, which one is planet Venus and which one is planet Saturn? Is the brightest one is the planet Venus, because it is the second planet of the solar system and closest to us. So moving forward, and if you turn your head towards the east, you will come across with the planet Jupiter, which is another brightest object in the sky. And below that, you will find planet Mars, which will be slightly reddish in its color, and you will surely be distinguish that planet from the rest of the objects in the sky, as it will look like an orange color object. So that is how they will create an arc across the sky from west to east, or from east to west.
Right, and then why does this phenomena matter so much to scientists, and does it offer any glimpse of our place, I mean to say Earth's place, in the broader configuration of the planetary system or the solar system?
Surely, these events are basically astronomical events, and they can actually excite or spark the interest of general public, especially our youth, to adopt astronomy and astrophysics. Because what we see is that when we see such an astronomical event, we see that we are not alone in this space. And talking about the solar system, we see that there are multiple objects out there in space, and they are orbiting around the sun, and they are waiting to be explored. And even if we go beyond the solar system, we can find that there are billions of stars in a galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies in our universe, and they could have their own solar system. So such astronomical events are basically very important for our young generation to look into the sky, to get into that, and to adopt space and astronomy and become Al-Biruni, Ibn al-Haytham, or maybe Tycho Brahe or Galileo for the next 100 years.
Yeah. Or probably think about things. You know, I think it's for us to kind of think about things, think about the creation of Allah Almighty as well. But while we're at it, Zain bhai, I've got an interesting question to ask, and that is that, you know, so how do we predict in motion of objects that the sky is ahead of time or backwards in time? So how do we do that?
It's basically, you see, we have certain laws like Kepler laws of planetary motion, and then we have the Newton's law of gravitation, which basically gives us the impact and which enable us to predict the motion of the object. So besides that, we have observations from thousands of years from astronomers and space enthusiasts. And from that observation, we have developed certain algorithms and models that can predict the motion of these objects. And which can gives us the idea that this planet is going in this way and that planet is going in that way. That is how we actually predict the motion of these objects.
Right, and then whenever we talk about to pursue in the essence of, you know, how the celestial bodies, just gazing on them ponders, you know, encourages us to ponder and reflect. So we've seen that there is particularly a notion, a sentiment within the superpowers, because they landed on the moon, and there's the notion that they want to preserve the first landing sites. So whenever we discuss about the upper space or these celestial bodies, do you believe that it has the potential to spark a conflict, or does this upper space and all these celestial bodies provide a common platform, a common heritage of the mankind, where we can have a common agreement for the betterment of the humanity? How do you think the scenarios will unfold in the future to come? Because space race is the next big thing. Intergalactic travel is the next big thing, where a lot of people are working on that.
And President Trump even spoke about this, you know, in his inaugural speech as well. And Elon Musk was standing right behind him as well. He said, okay, we're going to colonize Mars. So global commons, go ahead.
Yeah. So what we see is that space is basically a universal resource for all of us, for all the mankind and for all the humanity which is living on this planet. So back in 60s and 70s, there was a space war between USSR and America to who will land first on the moon. But after that, we see that there is kind of a struggle from all the countries across the globe, that they want to achieve self-sustainability in space, and they want to use space as a resource and to explore further deep into the solar system and out there. So definitely space is going to be the next big thing in the coming years. And as we can see that a lot of launches are going to happen. And we now see that the moon is going to be the second place after the Earth, which will have the colonies of humans. And from that, we see Mars as the second planet in our solar system, which we can make habitable and for the humans to go out in space and explore even further.
And I do believe that, you know, I came across a story where a 17-year-old girl is actually under training for now, and that too for a one-way flight to Mars, you know. So I think that's interesting. People are already at it. People are working around it as well. But sir, while we are at it, obviously, you know, we had the general manager from SUPARCO over here to speak about this launch, which was on the 17th of January from China. How did that launch go? You know, please share a little bit about that as well.
The launch was very successful, and that was the first electro-optical satellite which was indigenously developed by SUPARCO, and was launched from China and is into space, and that was very successful launch, and the satellite is in its orbit and doing its operations as predicted and as designed.
Right. Thank you so much, Zain, for bringing a very interesting conversation regarding this rare celestial events, and it has sparked the imagination of a lot of people, and especially such sort of astronomical events sparked the imaginations of a lot of the astronomers or the pulmonologists and whatever you call them, because they link the impact of such sort of celestial bodies with the humans. And it's very interesting to see and observe that how Allah Ta'ala has created such an intricate system of the things, where they're functioning very perfectly in the perfect balance, and there's fineness to observe every time we observe that.
Exactly, and not just that. I think every time that you look at it, imagine when we were growing up and we were in school, we we studied about the solar system, you know, the Sun, Mars, Venus, Earth, Jupiter, all of these planets. All of a sudden there was research, there's another galaxy, it might have their own solar systems. Within universe, you have billions of galaxies as well. And you know, even Quran speaks about it. कि हम इसको वसी करते चले जाएंगे.
Absolutely, and you reminded me of the Surah Mulk, one of the verse in which Allah says that no matter how much you observe, try to observe the any flaws in the system, in the universe, your eye will return back thak haar ke, because you're unable to see any flaws, and this is how impeccable Allah is and Allah's creation is. But now moving on to another very interesting bit of a segment.
Ikra bismi rabbikal lazi khalaq.
Yes, and that relates to how we are encouraged by Allah to read, write, and to go on the quest of education. So today happens to be 24th of January. It is the International Education Day, which is being observed under the theme of artificial intelligence in the education. This year, International Day of Education encourages reflections on the power of education to equip individuals and communities to navigate, understand, and influence technological advancements. Recognized by United Nations, the day emphasizes the importance of inclusive and equitable quality education for all, irrespective of the age, gender, or socio-economic status. Without inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong opportunities for all, countries will not succeed in achieving gender equality or breaking the cycle of poverty that is leaving millions of children and young adults behind. And this is something that we definitely need to ponder and reflect, because there are I think 21 million out of children schooled within the Pakistan. That is a very, very staggering
Exactly, and
number.
not just that. I think in addition to this, when you educate yourself, when your parents help you, you get that kind of education where you can go and represent your country, I think is something which is phenomenal. We really need to speak about it as well. You know, just yesterday we had, you know, two newly selected members of the National Youth Council,
Absolutely.
you know, which is under the auspices of the Prime Minister Mia Mohammad Shahbaz Saab. The chairman happens to be Rana Mashood Saab, the Prime Minister's Youth Program. We're very lucky. I just figured it out while I was just going through her profile yesterday, that she happens to be a colleague of ours as well. But imagine that the feats that she has actually accomplished. You know, she's the only Pakistani in the Guided Tours unit in UN, expert in global communication, masters in political science, first ever Urdu UN tours to be initiated, worked at ISSI and Ministry of Foreign Affairs, outstanding international delegate award. She's worked on climate change. You know, imagine, ladies and gentlemen, now finally she's actually becoming a member of the National Youth Council. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very lucky that we've actually been joined by Ms. RABEEA KHALID. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. How are you feeling today?
Walaikum assalam, and a very good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining.
It's an absolute pleasure hosting you, Rabia. So now let's move forward, since you're representing the younger voices and you want to project your personality and incorporate or represent the younger voices within the Prime Minister's National Youth Council. How do you intend to use that platform to project the younger voices? Because we see Pakistan has a demographic, what do you call, the category of 60% younger population, right? It's such a huge number. How do you tend to represent them?
Well, that's a very great point that you just raised, because almost 64% of the Pakistani population, it's under the age of 30.
Yeah, me too.
And good to know. Cheers. Well, so this program, basically, it's part the National Youth Council. It's a subcategory of the Prime Minister's Youth Program. So initially, the Prime Minister Youth Program, it started back in 2013.
Right.
But it kind of reinvented itself, and it started again, it picked up again in 2022 by Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, and the chairman is Mr. Rana Massoud.
Yep.
So I think it's a very beautiful opportunity for the younger generation of Pakistan, you know, to have their voice heard, and not only metaphorically have their voice heard, they can be part of the actual decision making, because the people who are actually involved in that sector, in that population, they can know what's right for them. They can tell what solutions they need, because when it's coming from them, it's more relevant rather than someone else telling them, right?
And which is why, you know, I do not really want you to be under the spot as well, but imagine that that's exactly the line of questions that we had yesterday, you know, for the newly selected National Youth Council members as well. Now imagine if you are to present them with whatever humble submission you have, that, hey, you know what, you know, this will work out for the youngsters of the country,
Right.
or whatever your responsibilities are. Do you have any good reference point where you can say, hey, you know what, this is exactly what we did, and, you know, it was really fruitful? Can you share it with our audiences, the impact of such National Youth Council, and how much can it deliver?
Well, I think the first important thing is recognizing the talent, because recognizing them and identifying them is very important. And like I said before, that this is an amazing platform for that. Once you identify them, only then you can make them be a productive part of your society, right? Then they can bring out the actual change. And I think it includes the National Youth Council, it includes 100 Pakistanis from all over the Pakistan, and also 10 Pakistanis from the diaspora,
Overseas,
like
yeah.
from overseas, right? So in that way, if I'm talking from my perspective, right, what I aim to do with that, because I've been working at the UN headquarters in New York City from the past 5 years, more than past 5 years in my current capacity. And over there, I saw the regional languages being spoken at the UN headquarters, right? Because UN has its 6 official languages, and Urdu is not part of that because it's not widely spoken in the world. Yeah. So I felt a little bit because, of course, even though I have to advocate the work of the UN generally, I cannot take outside of any member state, but of course, being a Pakistani youngster, I felt that why is my language not spoken at this international platform? I should do something in my capacity. So when COVID started, I did my research, I did some self-help, and there was not an official trainer to train me in the UN for the UN tours in Urdu language. So, I had to do my research, take help from other colleagues and my father. So eventually I launched this tour and it was a great success. Eventually it started with few numbers, but then it picked off,
Wonderful.
So creating basically presenting the soft image of Pakistan, the cultural beauty and the beautiful colors that we have in our culture,
And
right?
I think it's very, very much important because with the social media, you see that there's a lot of tourism which is prospering. People are seeing a lot of beautiful places and they want to explore a lot of exotic places, new
Definitely.
cultures, indigenous cultures, and Pakistan represents something, which is an untouched beauty, and we do have a lot of beauty in our country. So
Definitely.
Rabia, now let's talk about, because when we talk about younger population, we cannot disentangle how they fit into the equation of the social media or in the online spaces, right? Social media is such an integral part of our lives. We need to learn to manage with that. Of course, we are always discussing that, how excessive or obsessive interaction with it can lead to a lot of ramifications. But as a younger population and someone who represents youth, how are you going to make it a more vibrant space? Because a lot of people, they're earning their incomes through the social media, and we see that people are not going for the degrees anymore because social media presents them an alternative income stream, which is a very vibrant stream in the first place. How do you intend to
And
make
here
it?
you are with the political science degree, that too from the University of New York as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think if I talk about the Prime Minister's youth program and particularly the National Youth Council, they do have a digital online hub. They have a proper website where basically the youngsters, they can go and have the relevant resources needing for their department, because the Prime Minister's youth program, it has 4 E's. One of them is environment, employment, entrepreneurship, and engagement. And the National Youth Council, it comes under the engagement sector, right? So they're doing a lot of work practically on the ground. They're targeting the marginalized communities. Of course, we know the laptop distribution initiative. And I think it's a very useful tool, because once you have that online portal in front of you, then the world is the limit for you, right? What about the marginalized communities which don't have access to internet? Once they have that, but what if, even if they do have internet, what if they don't have a system? So a laptop gives them a foot in the door of this online world, relating it with the social media, right? You can earn through that platform. You can, market or marketize your product that you're producing. It could be even from an indigenous community. They could be selling their handicraft items, right? And I think social media in that aspect, it can have a huge impact.
Exactly, and thank you so much for alluding to that as well. That a laptop can actually be your breeding ground to reach out to the world, and it's wonderful.
Right.
But I was lucky enough to get my hand on the list of 100 people who've actually been, or youngsters who've been selected. Alhamdulillah, why they are selected and from what part of Pakistan they've been selected. So you've been selected from Faisalabad, right?
Yes, yes.
I think, and I'm from Faisalabad as well.
Oh,
Nusrat
great,
Ali Khan
good
sahab is
to
from
know.
Faisalabad.
Yes,
They
definitely.
Punjabi भी बड़ी सोहनी बोलते हैं अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह तुसी बोल लेंगे हो
Sanu bhi aandi hai
Yeah,
Chingi.
wonderful.
Chingi
So
aandi.
now what they say is that the reason that why they have picked up, for you to be the member of the National Youth Council is that you have worked with youth advocacy, worked at the United Nations, ambassador of United Nations to the public, and advisor for the permanent mission of Pakistan to the United Nations. How do you think that this profile of yours will actually help you make sure that you set your seat in a way where you're going to help other people with communications?
Well, that's a very great question. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think my struggle as an international student back in New York, and the struggles I faced, because I was an only child, so I did not have any any older siblings to guide me. Hey, this is what you can do, this is how you can get there. But of course, I'm so grateful to my parents that my parents played that role altogether. But I see there are so many talented people in Pakistan, right? So many people who can do even more than I can.
Yep.
But what they lack is the right platform.
Okay.
What they need is the right amount of guidance. So I want to basically share and make their path easier, because for me it wasn't easy, right?
Yep.
So I want to basically give them like a guiding light that this is what you can do, and I would love to be like a focal person which can provide them these global linkages, because that's what I wrote in my application when I was applying for
I've
the
got a
National
great
Youth
news for
Council.
you too as well. Now you've got 2 more siblings, one older, one younger.
Thank
get
you,
a
I
piece of advice
appreciate
from
that.
us.
God
Yeah.
bless you. That's so sweet of you.
That's
Jazakallah
wonderful,
khair.
Ravi, and you have a wonderful, I would say, CV, and there are lots of feathers to your cap. But now let's move our conversation further. And you said that one of the element or the ease of the Prime Minister National Youth Council is the environment, right? And we see that around the world, globally, there are a lot of climate-led activism which is led by the younger voices. But when we talk about the Pakistan, we see that how we are adversely affected, disproportionately affected by a menace that was created probably in the Industrial Revolution, when industrial or more civilized world, I would like to call them, because they like to call them like that, they are leading this very menace of climate change, right? And it is not Pakistan's responsibility. How do you intend to incorporate those younger voices which are coming from an indigenous backgrounds and in the local context, and make sure that there's a vibrant global conversation out there?
And that's also a very great point that you raised, because Pakistan, it's not one of the top contributors to the carbon emission and the greenhouse effect, yet we are the one affected the most by it, right? So there needs to be something done, because we are already over the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. We have surpassed that, right? We see what's happening, like the temperatures, like when it's hot, it's extremely hot. When it's cold, and it's extremely cold. Like there's no like transition to the weather, right? Fall doesn't feel like fall, spring doesn't feel like spring. So it's not a myth, it's not just a theory, global warming, it's actually happening, right? So there needs to be something done regarding that. And regarding this Prime Minister's Youth Program, there are many initiatives which are already underway. One of them being planting trees. It might seem that it's not a big initiative, but it actually helps to reduce the temperature of the environment, right? It can help with having a fresh environment, that being one. And also because me coming from Faisalabad, there are so many beautiful initiatives taken by such young girls, such younger population, that when I look at them, I was like, how do they have the time? Because like if someone is 14 or 15, they are like actively involved in their academics, whether it's O-levels, A-levels, like hardcore studying, and it's really hard to take the time out to do these extracurricular activities.
Point taken, and it's a wonderful point as well. Very quickly, one last thing which I would want to mention over here. You know how there's this stage where we say Miss World or Miss Universe or whatnot, and they're asked a question to kind of answer and let the world know, they're so intelligent as well. So for you, I'm sorry for doing this, but for you, there's this one last question which I'm going to ask you, and it is a reason for you to justify that you truly deserve to be a member of the National Youth Council. Why do you think that Pakistan is still unable to tap on the climate fund? Let's do it this way.
Well, that's a very good question. I think there needs to be a sense of partnership and collaboration, and initiative at the individual level is very important. Sometimes even I'm not like criticizing anyone, it could be even me at times. We lack the sense of individual responsibility. There are these big jargons, there are these big initiatives, but as long as there is no public and private partnership, we cannot have a holistic achievement of this, the action against the climate change. So I think we as individuals, we need to think that we do have a role to play in how our country performs globally.
Right,
Wow,
and
that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for saying that, and thank you so much for being on our show and for highlighting such an essential points which should be driven by the younger voices. And we at PTV will also strive to bring younger faces, younger voices, because they represents majority of Pakistan. So now moving on to another very interesting topic, which is how we can nurture the sacred spaces and have more boundaries within our Desi households, because we see that we are living in an environment, especially in the Desi culture, it is very goal driven culture, where we are skipping from one thing, rather we are going from one thing to another, and it's not a value driven, I would say, sometimes culture, because our questions and what we want to do are really not rooted in who we are, rather it's what defined by the norms, by the cultural values within the families and within the communities. And it's very, very much interesting that how there's a conversation on the mental health and how to espouse healthy boundaries, because I think when we talked about boundaries to our parents, the only thing that they understand from the boundaries is chauka chakka, right? And they're very irritated. And they're very irritated by the fact that we are talking about the boundaries, but how to develop them in order to have a more healthier existence for us also, and for our communities, our family members, and our also intimate circle. So to further delve into this conversation, we are very glad that we have been joined by someone who's very passionate about it. She has been talking about nurturing those sacred spaces. She is Rahma NASEEB. She is a trauma-informed integrative therapist. Assalamu alaikum, Rahma, and thank you so much for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
And let's unfold this conversation. So Rahma, when I was doing my research, I came across this very interesting term, that is the thrivers guilt. And I would say the millennials, they are living in an environment where they're exposed to more resources, more opportunities, more information than our parents, right? And our society espouses guilt a lot, and there's a lot of unprocessed guilt. How does that affect us in the first place?
For sure. I think guilt तो फूट के हमारे veins के अंदर किसी तरह infuse हुई हुई है. Like, it makes things so much harder for us to be confident about who we are, where we're going, what is it that we are actually looking for. And then since we're talking about boundaries, I think the biggest barrier to set those boundaries and then actually get where we want to go is the fact that we feel so much guilt. And it's unnecessary in the sense that one of the difference that we draw as counselors is that shame and guilt are a bit different. So guilt is perhaps something आपने कुछ बुरा किया है, आपको उसका guilt हो रहा है, and then you can work on it. Shame is something that is, we feel like it's about our identity, and it becomes so insidious, and it just seeps into everything. And I think जो हम as desis feel करना शुरू हो जाते हैं, that's shame, and that shame actually stops us from doing what we want to do and doing meaningful work.
Exactly. And in addition to this, so that's the most interesting bit to this conversation. I've gone through this myself. You might have gone through this yourself as well. It goes both ways. Now imagine, where we're talking about safe spaces, how, your mother shouldn't really be coming upstairs while you're having a conversation with your wife and whatnot. But imagine there's this human being you call a wife or a husband who can walk into your room whenever she or he wants. Do you think that there needs to be a limit to that? Hey, you know what, I'm having my own time. But within our Pakistani culture, it's so hard for us to understand that, hey, you know what, everybody needs to have that safe space. No?
100%. I'm so glad you brought that in, because I think when we're talking about boundaries, the conversation can be very Western, very, oh, okay, you go and set a boundary, and then you actually come to the real world, you come to your Desi society, and then it's not that simple. And the second part to it is that we do need a balance, because we do live in communities and societies that are different, and we thrive off that as well, right? And if we want to embrace that part of our culture, we can look for a way to actually not shut them out, but be better at the communication. So it is really a hard line. And I think that the way we are going to set boundaries as Desis is going to be completely different as compared to someone who is not living in our context. And I would still say that we'll find benefit with the boundaries, because I mean, if you look at the generation before us, right? हमारे जो parents की generation थी, उसमें there were so many points in my parents' life when I analyzed like there were points where they could have been more assertive. They could have drawn a line. They could have actually asserted themselves and, you know, been like, this is not okay. And that would have had a different impact on us as children. So the fact that, you know, even they could have benefited from it, we for sure need that to be able to protect our space, but also that balance of, okay, you know, family is important, and it actually, like our moms and our wives and our spouses and our husbands and all of these people are actually, you know, they are important people of our life, so we can't just cut them out. And I think
Absolutely. And
boundaries isn't cutting out.
absolutely, Rahma, but we've also seen whenever we talk about this notion or idea of seeking help or going to the therapy, so it is not very encouraged in our communities. It is seen that it is betrayal to our values, it is betrayal to our communities, and that is why it is something that is discouraged. So how can we emotionally outgrow our parents, because they were raised in that era with those sort of values where asking or resorting to help is not considered a very pleasant thing to do. And now, since we millennials, we talked in terms of setting boundaries, having healthy spaces, there's a lot of conversation on the mental health, how to balance these two different generations with very extremely, and I would say polarizing viewpoints that we harbor and espouse.
Hmm. I think also because I'm so glad you said polarizing, because we can also go on the extreme कि इतना हम लोग mental health के बारे में बात करते हैं that there is no balance, and it starts, every argument turns into, oh, you know, you're gaslighting me. तो वो दूसरी extreme है, but then the other extreme is कि नहीं, you know, आप therapy why do you need therapy, आप मेरे पास आ जाओ, you know, I'm your mom, I'm your dad, talk to me. um, I think this is such a big challenge, but what I've seen is that generally एक shift आ रहा है where the older generation is becoming a bit more open because they see us doing things a bit differently. और अगर वो थोड़ा सा हम they have that sort of openness, they do seek out options for help. And so a lot of my मैं खुद surprised हूँ, a lot of my clients have been in older than me, so in the 30 to 40 age bracket. और मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मैं like I'm so happy that they're coming into therapy, and so there's no one is like beyond the age of like uh, you know, help. So
Seeking
that
help, yeah.
openness is coming. जितनी बात करेंगे, I think जितनी you know, and also not shutting them down. I think हम अपने conversations में ना अपने family members को और अपनी older generation को इतना बुरा कहते हैं कि they sort of become defensive and they don't want to be part of the conversation. So we need to be
Exactly. And
doing it in a very mindful.
yeah, and in addition to this, thank you so much where you said that, you know, that there's no age for seeking help, and it's beautiful. But imagine that just very recently I came across this notion of people who, you know, a group of people who are retired from work, they have served the country, they have made sure that, you know, that their household is great, that their children have good education and whatnot. But imagine that whenever we are to speak about such help that we really need, you know, may it be therapy, we always speak in perspective or making precisely thinking about people who are getting from younger age to older age. There's a transition, right? But we have never thought about people, you know, who have retired, you know, have still got some bills to pay as well. We never think about, you know, their mental health. So, you know, while we say that, okay, the elderly are actually becoming more open about conversations, how do you think that we really need to put attention or give attention to the elderly's mental health as well?
I think definitely, and also like for them to understand that there is benefit. I think कुछ लोगों को ये लगता है कि okay, at a certain age क्या ही help कर लेगी therapy, right? So a lot of people a lot of people in the older age bracket can benefit from it, especially बल्कि मुझे तो ऐसा लगता है कि when they come into the therapy room, they have so much more stuff to unpack and so many things to rewire, and there is room to rewire, you know, and to work on those things. And I think hamare context mein perhaps we need interventions like you know, just bringing them in and speaking in their language, and that could look like just bringing someone on board in that age bracket jo ki unki language mein baat kar sake, you know, having workshops, having little activities that could perhaps bring in mental health because old जो मैंने एक struggle देखी है उस age bracket में, that is they face depression, loneliness, and they really need things to keep themselves busy and grounded.
Right, absolutely. And I think in our cultures, I also feel that our minds are also very colonized because we don't talk about happiness that much, right? All the time we are speaking about is this worry, that worry, the bills, and we have to do all of this stuff. You know, what will future hold to us in terms of very negative perception, and we need to rewire ourselves and talk about good things, happy things, and also be more culturally sensitive about it, because we cannot just cut off the relationships. We are living in our South Asian communities where there are strict hierarchies, and you have to be part of that culture. Thank you so much once again, Rahma, for being part of our show and for pioneering a very important conversation, and we will continue to have these conversations because they are the need of the time. Until next time, it's a goodbye, Allah Hafiz, and good morning.
Good morning. Have a great day. Juma Mubarak.